Hey guys, Dislitter Magic here, and it's time for MTG Mistakes part whatever the heck we're on. Okay, I just checked. 23. Hey, it's not my fault you guys keep making mistakes. Now this one, once again, is so simple that I probably should have made it sooner, except once you hear exactly what I have to say about it, well, you're going to figure out that it's really complicated. And I would say 98% of players that I've met screw this up. So I'm going to take a wild guess that this probably applies to you. I'm talking about playing the game differently if you go first and playing the game differently if you go second. Now in a past video I did cover mulliganing and how you should wait for the proper order because you might be giving away information early. But then I also hinted at the fact that if you know you're going second and you're going to start with that 8th card, you should probably use that in your mulligan decision. So if you go second, you basically start the game with 8 cards, so you should probably consider that when you mulligan, the fact that you're going to have one more card than your opponent, and it's one more out, as they call it, for a not-so-great hand. Like if you only have one creature, you've got one additional chance, compared to your opponent, of pulling your way out of it and pulling a creature. The same for land, the same for spells, so definitely always consider that. That's pretty obvious, though. Now the main point I'm going to make throughout this entire video is that if you go first, you're playing the entire match down 1 card compared to your opponent, but you will also get to 3, 4, and 5 mana quicker in theory. Now if you go second, you spend the entire game 1 card up on your opponent, but you will take longer to get to 3, 4, and 5 mana in theory. Now, anybody can get land screwed, anybody can fail to pull lands, and it's only about 1/3 of your deck in the first place, so that's why I said in theory, but if you both had the exact same deck, and the same person went first over and over and over, and you played 10,000 games in a row, they would get to 3 mana quicker the vast majority of the time. So all of the things being equal and nobody getting mana screwed, it's holding true. So all of that is an interesting little, fact. It's a fun philosophical point of view to think about the game, but how does that help anything? How does it actually affect your play? What should you do with that information? Well, let's start with going first. If you go first, you're going to get to 3 mana quicker. So if you have a whole bunch of 3 and 4 cost cards in your hand, just think, okay, I'm going to get there a half turn before they do. So that's more okay than if I was going second. Now, if you're going to play the entire game 1 card down compared to your opponent, because you're going first, you don't get to draw on the first step, all of your cards are more important. So if your opponent uses some kind of removal spell, it's going to be devastating to you compared to them. Like on turn 3, they're eliminating 1/9 of your cards, and on their turn 3, if you eliminate one of their cards, you're eliminating 1/10 of their cards. That's double-digit percentages more detrimental to you with the same spell doing the same thing. So if you destroy their 2/2, great. If they destroy your 2/2, that's more likely to do more damage to you, or, well, it just is more damaging to you. So if you need a 2-card combo to go off and you've only got one of it and the rest is just pretty good stall cards, counter spells, removal, and all that, and land, and you're going first, you might want to reconsider. So if you're starting second, what importance comes out of that? Well, your removal is way more important. If you're starting the game with 1 creature and 3 removal spells and 3 lands, you think, oh, that's a crap hand. You're going second and they're a card down. They're bare minimum a card down. If they mulligan, they're 2 cards down. So by turn 4, if you use 2 removal spells on 2 of their creatures, you probably just utterly screwed them over. Now, if it's turn 4 and they remove 2 of your creatures, whatever, you have a 1-card advantage. It's still detrimental, but it's a lot less detrimental. Now, I am exaggerating this just a little bit to make the point, but in the first 4 turns, there's not that many cards to play with, so a 1-card advantage is pretty big in the first 4 turns. Now, if it drags out to turn 15, it almost doesn't even matter who went first at that point. In fact, each turn that you get away from the first turn, it reduces the advantage or disadvantage that you had for going first or second. 19 cards total drawn versus 20 cards drawn is practically nothing, but 7 cards drawn versus 8 is huge, absolutely huge. Now keep in mind that you can't magically run away from the fact that you went first or second, okay? Let me make a drastic example. You both start with 4 lands and 3 2/2 creatures. The person who goes first is going to win. That's at least what's going to happen by default with completely even odds. So if you draw a board wipe, yeah, okay, you're going to win. So it comes down to what you draw, but both hands being perfectly equal and both players saying, yeah, we're going to start with that. Okay, the person who went first has the attack advantage and their creatures basically get on the field one turn earlier, a half turn, and then they deal damage to your life points first, and they just have an entire one combat advantage over you. So if you went second, you automatically lost. I mean, it's that drastic. So you're thinking, oh yeah, I can pull my way out of it. But you don't get it. You already lost the game just because you went second. You both kept equal power hands, but you already lost, and now you're hoping to pull your way out of it. That's not a 50-50 match, that's like a 30-70 match. So you can't ignore the fact that the other person went first and that they have a combat advantage. So what you should have done is said, oh man, I mean, all creatures, he's already got the swing advantage. Depending upon what my deck does, ditch it, I'm gonna mulligan. Then on the mulligan, you pull one universal counterspell, a cancel, and then two kill spells. You just automatically won the game. They have one less card than you, so they bring out 3 creatures. You kill the first one, kill the second one, counter the third one. Now they're out of cards, which, you know, obviously they drew something, but we're ignoring future draws because we'll pretend those are equal as well. Let's say you both draw 3 more creatures while you still won. That's because you know you're going second, so you know the value of removal and the value of counterspells went through the roof. And the same is true if you both start with 3 lands and then 4 spells that all cost 3 and 4. The person going first will win because they get them out 1 turn sooner. So all things being equal and all the draws being equal, they will win automatically. If it's actually the previous example but reversed, that's where it gets really interesting. You're going second and you've got 3 creatures and 4 lands. They're all 2/2s. The player that's going first has 4 lands and 2 kill spells, 1 counterspell. So you trade, and then basically resume the game, but you're 1 card up. You started the game with an 8th card, and then after that you both drew the same amount. So theoretically, you'll be the first one to bring a creature back out on the field, you'll have the swing advantage, and you will win. So all things being equal, completely taking out any kind of variance, saying these are perfectly 50-50 matches, it flip-flopped. The person who goes second would win with that counterspell and removal hand, and the person who goes first would lose with that. And you're probably saying, oh, that would never happen, and we're going to draw something, and our decks are built completely differently. That's called variance. That's called results. That's called probability resolving. On turn 0, before any of you put anything on the field, it's exactly the scenario that I said, because it's all just floating up in the air. You have no idea what either of you are going to draw, and if you don't know what each other is going to draw, then just assume it's going to be exactly dead equal on advantageousness. Obviously, you should not actually expect that to happen in the actual game, but for calculating probability and calculating what you should do in decision making, you should see it that way, which means the person going second should consider their removal and counterspells to be extremely important and effective, and the person going first should consider their creatures and their high-cost spells to be extremely effective. Now, so far, everything I said really only affects the mulligan. You know, you're like, oh, I've got an all-creature hand. Oh, crap, I'm going, second or whatever. I should dump it, which honestly, it's not that big of a disadvantage. If you're just going to flood 4 creatures and 3 lands, you're probably going to win because your opponent probably doesn't have that, so you have to consider that as well. But if you're going second and you have 1 creature, which, your opponent already has the combat advantage, you only have 1 creature, that looks bad. But you're holding 2 lands and 3 kill spells and 1 counterspell. You have an enormous advantage, and you have to realize that. You're nuking their incredibly precious, incredibly important cards that they're short on. And the whole time you're playing a card up on them. So as you're removing their cards from hand, effectively, whether they hit the field and then you kill it, or they take it from their hand, put it on the stack, and then you counter it. Either way, you're taking cards from their hand and putting them in the graveyard. As you do that, you're wiping out their, cards that they have very limited supply of, while you're also playing a card up on them, and thus theoretically bringing out more creatures to hit them with. So this is more about don't mulligan by saying, hey, this hand is terrible, because you might be wrong. You also have to consider if you're going first or second. So yay, it's another mulliganing video. I love mulligan decisions. How much more could I possibly know about them? Woo. Nope, this affects gameplay too, and let me give a really quick example. So you're going first, and you're playing an extremely counterspell heavy deck, like basically a draw-go deck. If you're not familiar with a draw-go deck, it's blue counterspells, you draw a card, you do nothing, you tell your opponent to go. You pass the turn, then whatever they do, you counter it. It goes back to the early days of Magic, and they are actively trying to remove that type of deck from every single standard cycle. They have said that. So naturally, I built one because, yay, go blue. It was the deck that was in the gameplay footage in the background of my last couple videos, so just go watch those if you're interested. I haven't made a deck video on it yet because the deck sucks. The deck sucks, and the deck can't beat anything. It's fun, though, because all the creatures have flash, so it's like 16 counterspells and 24 creatures with flash. That is the most draw-go deck in the history of draw-go, so you basically just play the entire game backwards. So with that deck, the strategy is drop land, do nothing, pass the turn, counter their spell, and if you have mana left over, flash in a creature. And then by your turn, it doesn't have haste. Or, it doesn't have haste. It doesn't have summoning sickness. And then you just bash them in the face while stopping every single thing that they do. The standard version of this deck sucks. You guys saw me win with it repeatedly, but it's just not very strong. It's hilarious and really fun and really annoying, but it's not great. The modern version of it is a whole different story. It is like rip your hair out frustrating to play against. Your opponent doesn't get to play Magic unless you say so, and you don't say so. And everybody loves the phrase, wait, during your end step. So anyway, you get how the deck works, you get how to operate it, but if you're going first on turn 2 or 3, you should treat it completely differently. One of your big advantages for going first is you get to hit their life total first, in theory, all things being equal. So that's your trade-off. You didn't get that 8th card, but you get a creature out first. It loses summoning sickness first, in theory, and then you get to swing and hit them first, in theory. So at the end of the game, you can finish them off one turn sooner. That is the number one biggest advantage to going first. And let me just add that mathematicians have done all this math, looked at every deck style out there, and in Modern, at least, and a little bit in Standard they suspected, going first is a bigger advantage and more likely to result in you winning the game than starting the game with 8 cards, which is obviously what your opponent does. Wizards likes to, suggest that it's a perfectly equal trade-off. It is not. If you go first, you're more likely to win. And if you go second, you're starting at a disadvantage. So, if you go first, do not take your biggest advantage and just flush it down the toilet. So in this example, if you're going second, you're control heavy, you're probably just going to win. Just in general, you're probably going to win. But if you find yourself going first, which if you win the die roll, you should, because you want to get to 3 so you can cancel everything, not just negate some stuff. If you go first, you have to hit them. And that's not the normal way that the deck goes, but that's the way you have to play it. So it's counterintuitive. The normal way is draw, go, and wait for them to do something. When they do something, counter it. No, on turn 2, bring out a freaking creature. If you don't bring out a creature on turn 2 or 3, you don't get them down to like 18 life sooner, and you just completely got rid of your advantage. And like I said, if the game goes out to turn 20, you got rid of your advantage because you went out to 20 and it kind of evened out. But if you failed to summon a creature on turn 2 or 3, you shot yourself in the foot. So let me give an example. So turn 1, you drop a land, you say go. Turn 1, your opponent who's going second drops a land, they say go. Turn 2, you drop your second island, because it's a blue deck. And then you wouldn't want to flash in a creature. There is literally no reason to flash in a creature earlier than their next end step, unless you have to block a surprise haste attacker, I guess. So ambush blocking during combat, okay, that's the one, but that's later. That's a lot later. So you wouldn't just drop in a creature and be like, hey, I dropped in a creature because I need that, I need to hit for 2 with my 2/1 spirit in the air. No, don't be stupid about it. But on their turn, you've got your 2 mana open, you didn't do anything. They drop their second land, and then they drop in, say, a 1/1 that costs 2 that has, some stupid special ability like First Strike or something to even it out. Or maybe like a 1/1 flyer for 2, let's say that. You still either maintained the combat advantage or it became a tie because your 2/1 flyer with flash could either trade with the creatures and then you're both still equal, or they could not block. You'll swing, get them down to 18. On their turn, they'll swing and get you down to only 19, and you still maintain the combat advantage. And you want that life point crushing advantage, trust me. Blue does not do a whole lot of damage, and this deck is no exception. So every point of damage you can possibly do is insanely important, so you don't want to say, oh, I'm going to use my, Syncopate clone, which is also in the deck. It's pay 1 blue and then X, and then you make their spell cost 1 more. So you would cast that, they would lose their creature, and that's actually a misplay. You would think, oh, but I need to keep their stuff off the field. I need to counter every single thing they do. No, that's a misplay. Trust me, it's a misplay. Weren't you listening this entire time? Stop screaming at me and screaming at your screen and saying that it's not a misplay. It's a misplay. I know the whole point of the deck is to counter the first 5 things that they do. It's still a misplay. They're starting with 8 cards, so every time that you take one of their cards and put it in the graveyard by countering the summoning, you did a lot less damage to them than they would do to you doing the same thing. So you're already at a slight detriment there. They're more likely to replace that creature than you are. And if you play that spell, you can no longer flash in a creature, and you will get them to 18 life points 1 entire turn cycle slower. So at the end of the game, you're giving them 1 additional card plus 1 additional card as part of their additional turn that you would have already killed them on to turn the game around. That's 1 turn and 2 cards. Don't do that. You'll lose the game. That's why I said it's a misplay. So that is the absolute perfect example. If you've got hitting them in the life total superiority, don't give it up just because your deck plays a little bit different. If you're running the polar opposite of an aggro deck, guess what? For the first 3 turns of the game, if you're going first, congratulations, you're running an aggro deck. Make it as aggro as you can. Either that or have a really damn good reason not to. By the way, it is pronounced aggro, not aggro. I'm not British. It's aggro. I'm from Wisconsin, and it's aggro. I honestly have no idea how you guys think I should be pronouncing that. All I hear is, oh, you're pronouncing it wrong. Well, the only other pronunciation I've heard is British, and I think we all know I'm not. I'm not nearly polite enough to be British. So if you go first, remember, do not give up your hitting them in the face first advantage. It can win you the game. And if you're going first, do not overestimate the power of your removal, because they have 1 card advantage on you. If they play a card, then you counter it, then they play a card, then you counter it, then they play a card, then you counter it, then they play a card, then you counter it, they're still 1 card ahead. You just traded 1 for 1, and they're still ahead. They're probably going to win the game because of that, so you should just keep that in mind. And then, of course, invert the whole thing if you're going second. Your creature's a little bit more expendable because theoretically you've got more of them. But keep in mind that you're going to get to 3 and 4 and 5 land a little bit slower than your opponent, so they're probably going to have more powerful things out quicker than you, so remember that. And this comes into like decisions on mulliganing, decisions on what to play on turn 2 and 3, decisions on how to block, if you should chump block, if you should trade. Trading is never equal. It could be a 1-1 and a 1-1, and it's not equal. It comes down to who went first. So you guys you could fill in the rest. I could give every example, but you kind of get it. I mean, you get what the advantages and disadvantages are. So next time you're playing, just pretend that there's like an emblem out and it says you have a 1 card advantage over your opponent. Woo! And all of your removal is 14.2% more effective. Woo! And that's your like permanent fuel bonus for the rest of the game. Now, if you have any further questions about this, or you have any examples, you want to know who has the advantage in a given situation, definitely leave it down in the comments section. Otherwise, I hope this video helped out a lot. I hope it totally blew your mind, because whenever I explain this to people, it usually does. And I promise my next MTG Mistakes video will be a lot simpler, because the last 2 were really heavy, really just scenario, like mind-bending and just thought-heavy and basically hard to remember and hard to comprehend. Just kidding, the next one will probably be worse. They're getting worse as I go. I already covered all the really easy ones. And of course, if you have an idea for a mistakes video, feel free to send me a message on YouTube. It never tells me when I get messages, but I'll read them eventually, maybe. Otherwise, tweet it at me. I guarantee I'll see that. Or just leave it in the comment section below. I'll probably see that. And same goes for just not MTG Mistakes videos, any other video, any video at all. If you think I should make a video juggling knives, so do I. I can't, but, it'd be some good YouTube if I tried. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.